Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're coming from. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited to be talking about the FAFSA, the 26-27 FAFSA that is now out and available for students to complete. We're going to be talking about the FAFSA as well as strategies to support unaccompanied homeless youth and foster youth in applying for financial aid. So my name is Caleb McKay. I am the FAFSA Completion Senior Manager for SchoolHouse Connection. I have a background in financial aid. In my last role, I was the single point of contact for unaccompanied homeless youth at my institution. So I love financial aid. I love this work. And then we're also joined today by Jenny from the Youth Law Center. I'll let Jenny introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Pokempner. I work at the Youth Law Center and glad to be here with you, and thanks Schoolhouse Connection for including me.
And Jenny will be popping in here and there to add some insight and information on the foster youth pieces of our presentation today. And we are also joined by some friends over at Colorado State University. We'll hear a little bit more from them later on about the work that they're doing to support their youth experiencing homelessness and similar populations and ways that go beyond just submitting the FAFSA or applying for financial aid, but really creating a sense of belonging and inclusion within the college. So some general housekeeping before we dive in any further. This webinar is scheduled to last 75 minutes. And if you have any questions, we have a chat box as well as a Q&A box. So please put your questions in the Q&A box that we can easily track and keep record of those questions, and the chat is for general welcome or any other comments that you had to add. This session is being recorded. It will be posted on our website. So all of our webinars are recorded and posted on our website. Will likely be available sometime next week for those not watching live. There will be a certificate issued for attendance, confirming that you attended and completed this webinar. This is manually distributed, so it may take a little bit for those to get out, but we hope to get those out later today or even tomorrow morning. And then if you are not part of our Slack community, please join our Slack community. It's a great place to connect with your peers and see what others are doing in similar areas to yourself and across the country. So we have a wide variety of people that we are connected with or that you can connect with in the Slack community and ask questions and see what people are doing. For anyone who is not familiar, Schoolhouse Connection is a national nonprofit working to overcome homelessness through early care and education. We do that through strategic advocacy and partnerships with youth and families experiencing homelessness, as well as K-12 schools and districts, institutions of higher education, early childhood programs, and service providers working to serve youth experiencing homelessness. If you haven't visited our website, I highly recommend visiting our website. There's a wealth of knowledge and resources. A lot of things that we'll be talking about today are also covered on our FAFSA page. So that's a great place to just peruse for information, templates, and tools that are free and at your disposal. We also have a really good newsletter, which is a great source to stay up to date on federal and state policy changes and advocacy opportunities, but also information on opportunities to learn and connect in webinars such as this one. So a little roadmap for the next hour and a bit. We'll first talk about an overview of homeless youth and foster youth on the FAFSA as it relates to financial aid. Then we'll go over the newest 2026-27 FAFSA. We'll talk about the process of submitting the FAFSA and some updates to the form. We'll also hear from our friends at Colorado State University on some initiatives that they are doing to support their independent students. Then we'll go over some best practices. So when we are talking about homeless youth and financial aid, we are using the federal definitions from the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. So to be considered an independent student for financial aid purposes, A student must either be unaccompanied and homeless, where they are not living in the physical custody of a parent or legal guardian, and they are lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, or they can be an unaccompanied, self-supporting, and at risk of homelessness. So unaccompanied, again, is not living in the physical custody of a parent or legal guardian. And then self-supporting means they pay for their own expenses, including housing. And at risk of homelessness is when their housing may cease to be fixed, regular, and adequate. And so one of the key differences here in higher education or financial aid versus the K-12 system is that the student must be identified as homeless, but also unaccompanied. So students experiencing homelessness with their parents are still considered a dependent student and must report parent information on the FAFSA. So the purpose of an unaccompanied homeless youth or unaccompanied self-supporting and at risk of homelessness determination is to allow the student to apply for financial aid as an independent student without parent information. So just because a student is independent through a homeless youth or a foster youth designation does not necessarily mean that they're guaranteed to receive more financial aid. It just removes the barrier of including parent information so that they can apply for financial aid with just their own information. Now, Schoolhouse Connection has created a flow chart for those of us who are visual people to help determine whether a student can be considered independent through a homeless youth determination. So the first question we want to ask is the student unaccompanied? Are they living in the physical custody of a parent or legal guardian? If they are with their parents or a legal guardian, they are not an unaccompanied homeless youth. So if they're living with their parents, they'll need to report parent information, even if the family is experiencing homelessness together. So let's say the student is unaccompanied. We can move down to the next level and ask, does the student's situation meet the criteria for homelessness? Meaning, do they lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence? If the answer is yes, they're an unaccompanied homeless youth, and they can be considered independent on the FAFSA. If the answer is no, we can then ask, is the student self-supporting and at risk of homelessness? So are they paying for all of their own expenses, including their housing? And is their housing at risk of ceasing to be fixed, regular, and adequate? So if the answer is that is also yes, then the student is still considered an independent student. But if the answer is no to both homeless and self-supporting and at risk of homelessness, the student is not considered independent through a homeless youth determination, and we'll cover this a little bit later, but the student might have another option to apply as independent through what's called a dependency override or provisional independence. And I will say too that these slides will be available with the recording on our website. So if you check back in later this week, probably early next week, these slides as well as the recording should be available. So all of this flow chart as well as any resources and links that we refer to in this presentation will be available to you. I will hand it off to Jen.
Thanks, Caleb. Another basis for being an independent student for the purposes of the FAFSA is if a student was in foster care at age 13 or older. And foster care generally refers to when a child or youth is formally placed through the child welfare system, and they can be in any type of placement. We put some of the examples that are most common on this slide. A foster family home could be a foster home in which a kinship care provider is providing care, group care, residential care, and also the array of settings that young people who are in extended foster care, many who might be in college or a training program like supervised independent living placements or even a dorm setting. Those young people are in foster care if they've been placed there through the Child Welfare Agency. And again, for the purposes of the FAFSA, the young person would be independent based on foster care status if they were in foster care at any time at age 13 or older. And that includes young people who were in care at 13 or older and might leave to a permanency arrangement like adoption or even reunification when they're applying for financial aid. If they were in foster care at 13 or older, their current status, even if it's no longer in foster care, they're still eligible. And want to note that for those young people who might also be involved with the juvenile justice system, again, as long as they were in foster care at age 13 or older, even if they then maybe go into the juvenile justice system or have dual system involvement, they are still eligible to say that they were in foster care at 13 or older and be eligible to be considered independent. Another category just wanted to note as a basis for being an independent student that might impact youth in foster care is if they entered into a guardianship arrangement. We're not going to focus on that one as much, but just wanted to note for some of you who are working with youth involved or leaving the foster care system through guardianship, they would also be eligible to be considered independent.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. So when we're talking about dependent and independent students, we've mentioned this a few times already. All that means is whether or not the student needs to report parent information on the FAFSA. So a dependent student is reporting their parent information. An independent student is not reporting parent information. So it's either just going to be the student or the student and their spouse if the student is married. So an unaccompanied and homeless youth with that determination is considered independent, as well as an unaccompanied, self-supporting, and at risk of homeless youth. Those are independent. And a foster youth or a former foster youth who is in foster care at any time for any length of time since they turned the age of 13, they're considered independent. However, a student experiencing homelessness that is accompanied, in other words, they're still living in the physical custody of a parent or legal guardian, they're considered dependent students and must report parent information on the FAFSA. All right, we're going to go into first some changes and updates with this latest FAFSA. So one of the changes that we are excited to see is that the FSA ID, or in other words, the account or profile that a student or parent uses on the FAFSA, is now available immediately upon creation of that account. So in the past, a student or parent could create the account, then they would have to wait 1 to 3 business days before they could use that account to submit a FAFSA. We saw this created additional barriers for students who maybe have limited access to transportation, able to have limited access to resources and help filling out the FAFSA. So they might come to a financial aid application night put on by their school or a community resource, create their account, and then not be able to continue. Now, a student can come to an event or an appointment, create their account, and submit the FAFSA all in one sitting, which is wonderful news, and we're excited to see that. And as far as the timeline of this latest FAFSA, there were a few beta testing phases late this summer and leading up to the October 1st deadline to be released. And so in December of 2024, I believe, there was a law passed that now requires the FAFSA to be available and fully functional October 1st, the year prior to the start of the school year. So now we can count, as required by law, the FAFSA will be open by October 1st every year. And this 26-27 FAFSA was actually available about a week ahead of schedule. So the beta testing went so well, they felt confident enough to release the FAFSA ahead of schedule. And so far, we're hearing mostly good things. One of the other changes is with the contributor flow. So if you remember the dependent versus independent students, students who are experiencing homelessness, if they're still with their families or with their parents, they are considered dependent students and will need to report parent information. And so the contributor flow In other words, the process of inviting and including parent information on the FAFSA has been simplified. So for any of you who have worked with a student and a parent trying to submit the FAFSA together, get the student's FAFSA invited over to the parents, in the past, that's not always worked as smoothly as intended. And so now all the student needs to do is enter in an email for the parent, and then an invite code will be created or generated. So all the parent needs to log in and complete their portion of the student's FAFSA is that invite code. So no other personally identifiable information has to match and be verified. They just need that code in order to log in and fill out their portion. So we've already been seeing this in the field, that this has greatly reduced the number of headaches and challenges that students are facing in trying to invite their parents or other contributors to fill out the FAFSA. And then another change that is a little less specific to the FAFSA form itself, but still involved in the process, is that there's an increase in number of students selected for verification. So students, after they submit the FAFSA, may have additional requirements to satisfy with the financial aid office. And during this year, we've seen an increase in the number of students selected for specifically identity verification, which means they need to provide a copy of a government issued photo ID that is not expired. We'll touch a little bit more on this identity verification in a little bit, but know that this is a recent change, or the amount of students having to satisfy this requirement has increased. And we at SchoolHouse Connection recently put out a webinar, maybe not so recently, time has been flying by, but back in August, we put out a webinar all about identity verification for the FAFSA, for financial aid. We have a resource page on our website, so go check that out. It's a great resource to use for yourself as a professional, but also in working with students, that breaks down what is verification, what needs to be done, what the students need to know. So now we're going to get into the actual process of submitting the FAFSA. So in the first section, under personal circumstances, they will see a question that asks a student to select all that apply for student personal circumstances. And one of the options here is to select at any time since the student turned 13, they were in foster care. So if that is the case for the student, they can select that option, as well as anything else that applies, including a legal guardianship at the time that they turn the age of majority in their state, active duty military service, veteran, dependents that depend on the student for more than 50% of their financial support. So if any of these apply, this would indicate that the student is an independent student. So if they say none of these apply, in the past, saying none of these apply, we would just move on to this. I'm sorry, let me rephrase this. In the past, if a student selected any of the items on that last screen, they would skip to the next section and continue forward with the assumption that they're an independent student. But within this last year, we've seen a change that removes that skip logic. So now that if a student answers, say that they were in foster care, they can still answer that they, since July 1st, have experienced homelessness. And then once they move forward into the financial aid office, they have multiple options to verify their independent student status. And so once a student has verified their independent student status with the financial aid office through any of the options available, and there are multiple options, whether that's foster youth, homeless determination, legal guardianship, or any of the other options that we listed on the last screen, they don't need to verify the other options for independence. So if a student is in foster care or was in foster care and is currently homeless, and the student is able to verify their foster youth status with the financial aid office, they don't also need to verify their homeless status as well. So this is the homeless question that we'll see on the FAFSA. The 26-27 FAFSA will ask at any time on or after July 1st, 2025, was the student unaccompanied and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? So if they answer yes to this question, they'll receive another question that pops up asking who can make this determination. So it lists all of the authorized individuals who can make a determination of homelessness for that student. Now, that list includes the director or designee of a director of an emergency or transitional shelter, street outreach program, homeless youth drop-in center, or other programs serving those experiencing homelessness. Now, this list has been updated as a result of the FAFSA Simplification Act a few years ago. So in the past, these shelters needed to be funded by Department of Housing and Urban Development, but that is no longer the case. So the funding for these shelters is not a factor in determining whether that individual can provide a determination. We just need to know if there are any of these programs serving those experiencing homelessness. The list also includes the student's high school or school district homeless liaison, usually called a McKinney-Vento liaison, or their designee, as well as a director or designee of a director of a project supported under the TRIO or Gear Up programs. And then lastly, a financial aid administrator who made a determination during the current or previous school year at a different institution. So if the student selects any of those individuals, they will then get a prompt saying that they are an independent student. Based on these answers, you're an independent student. This means that you don't need to answer financial questions about your parents to complete your FAFSA form. So then they will skip to only the student questions and they'll be able to submit then and there. But students are not always able to provide or receive a determination from any of these individuals. So they may select none of these apply. They will then get a different prompt that lets them know they are a provisionally independent or unaccompanied homeless youth. So I want to point your attention to this paragraph toward the bottom that says, if you have indicated that you are unaccompanied and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless, the financial aid office at your school is required to make a determination of your status based on a written statement from you or a documented interview with you. Now contact your school's financial aid office to complete this process. So this is telling the student, based on your answers, the financial aid office will need to make a determination for you based on a written statement or a documented interview. So the student will need to contact their school's financial aid office to follow up. Now let's say the answer is none of the above, and we move forward. The last question that we will see in this personal circumstances section of the FAFSA will ask, do unusual circumstances prevent the student from contacting their parents, or would contacting their parents pose a risk to the student? So it does list a few examples here that may qualify for these unusual circumstances, such as leaving home due to an abusive or threatening environment, abandonment or estrangement from parents, a victim of human trafficking, and more. But right before we have the yes or no answer prompts, there is a prompt that says, if the student's circumstances resulted in not having a safe and stable place to live, they may be considered a homeless youth and should review the answer to the previous question about being unaccompanied and homeless. Now, the reason this text is here is because a lot of students and professionals as well are maybe not aware that a student's situation actually do meet the criteria and definitions for unaccompanied and homeless, or unaccompanied, self-supporting, and at risk of homelessness. So this gives that student another chance to go back, review those questions about potentially meeting that criteria as a homeless youth. And so the definitions for homeless, as we touched on a little bit earlier, expand beyond just living in a car or a shelter or on the streets. Some common examples we see are uh, staying with others due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason. So this is often referred to as couch surfing or being doubled up. That is one of the most common examples that we see. And then another example we see is that if a student is in college, they're living on campus in their dorms or residence halls, but when those dorms close over breaks or holidays, if they don't have fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence to return to, they do still meet the definitions for unaccompanied and homeless, even if they're living on campus throughout the semester. So let's say they answer yes to this unusual circumstances question. So no to homeless, yes to unusual circumstances. They'll get the same prompt as if they had answered the unaccompanied homeless youth questions, but with no determination available. Except this time we want to focus on the paragraph above where we focused on last time. So for these students, if you are not in contact with a parent or contacting a parent would pose a risk to you, you are considered a provisionally independent student. You will need to speak with the financial aid office at your school about your circumstances. Now, many schools will call this process a dependency override. Some schools might call it a petition for independence or something similar. But in either case, the student will need to follow up with their school's financial aid office to move forward and continue their process of applying for financial aid. And then I will hand it back off to Jenny to talk about foster youth.
Thanks, Caleb. And so, kind of in line with the verification for a young person who is homeless and unaccompanied, the FAFSA Simplification Act did expand the types of documentation and who can verify a young person with experience in foster care status, with the goal of making it less burdensome both on young people and those that are working with them. So among the proof and documentation to verify foster youth status, you could use a court order or a official documentation such as a letter on child welfare agency letterhead explaining the youth status that they were in foster care at age 13 or older. The state Medicaid agency, any kind of data matches. Most young people are eligible for Medicaid while they're in foster care. And if they are no longer in foster care, they are eligible for Medicaid for former foster youth that they left at 18. So you can definitely utilize eligibility for other programs that a youth was accessing because of their foster care status. So similarly, if a youth has proof of eligibility for the education and training voucher or the Chafee program, that eligibility would also be able to verify their foster care status for the purposes of the FAFSA. And for young people that might have difficulty getting documentation from the Child Welfare Agency, the law does allow a young person to get verification from if they have an attorney that currently or has represented them, a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate, or an independent living program worker. They can also serve as an individual who can provide verification, and they can do it through a letter, but they could also do it through a phone call that then the financial aid officer documents. And that's also the case with the public or a private agency providing documentation. So we hope that the range of options again makes it easier for young people to get verification without too many burdens.
Great, thank you so much. And then just we're going to touch on who can verify the homeless status, but if you remember on the FAFSA form, there's a question after they answer yes to the homeless question that asks who can provide a determination. It lists each of these individuals. And so providing a determination for homelessness or documentation of foster youth or foster care, this will all happen with the financial aid office after the student submits their FAFSA. So in the general timeline, a student will submit their FAFSA. It'll take a few days to process and verify through various databases, and then the financial aid office will receive that information and may or may not have some additional requirements for those students. And so, uh, for students selecting that they were in foster care and or experienced homelessness after July 1st of the applicable year, they will most likely need to follow up with their financial aid office to provide this determination or documentation of their foster care status. So, who can verify a homeless status for the FAFSA? This list includes the school district liaisons or McKinney-Vento liaisons or their designee. So this designee is a recent change from the FAFSA simplification a few years prior. The list also includes the director or designee of a director of an emergency transitional shelter, street outreach program, homeless youth drop-in center, or any other program serving individuals experiencing homelessness. And again, the funding does not matter for these shelters. The list also includes the director of TRIO or Gear Up or their designee. And then if a financial aid administrator made a determination at a different school and the student is transferring, they can take that determination with them. So after the student submits the FAFSA, they may have some additional requirements. In other words, they may be selected for verification. Now, verification is really just a fancy word for there's some other requirement that needs to be resolved for the financial aid office. So after the student submits the FAFSA, they may need to turn in some additional documents or IDs with the financial aid office. So as we mentioned a little bit earlier in this presentation, the rate of students being selected for identity verification has increased significantly during this 2025-26 school year. So for students who are attending school or attending college classes now or in spring and summer of 2026, more of those students are being required to present an ID to the financial aid office. So any of these requirements that are populated or required after a student submits their FAFSA, they must be resolved with the financial aid office before that student can be eligible to receive financial aid, which is why we strongly recommend that students get in touch with their financial aid office after they submit their FAFSA just to make sure that everything is in place, that the financial aid office does not need anything else in order to receive or disperse their financial aid. So some common requirements might include a copy of their ID, social security cards, birth certificates, I-94s for students that is applicable to permanent resident cards, as well as financial documents like copies of taxes or asset information, or any other documents or statements about household size or other circumstances. So what do we want students to know in regards to this ID or identity verification? We want them to have a valid, non-expired, government-issued photo ID. So this is typically or commonly a driver's license or a state ID, maybe a US passport. Has to have their photo on it, has to be issued by the government. So a school ID, even if it has their photo on it, is not, it does not meet these requirements. And so if a student is selected for this ID or identity verification, the student must resolve that verification before they can receive financial aid. So they have to provide a copy of their ID to the financial aid office before they can continue with their financial aid. And it is possible for a student to be selected for this verification after their financial aid has already paid. And without going too far into the weeds here, just know that depending on how the school does their accounting process, it would most likely result in a balance owed by the student because that financial aid would have to be pulled back until that requirement is resolved. So it's important to check in with the financial aid office maybe a couple times throughout the semester just to make sure everything is good to go, everything is set, and then make sure we can resolve those requirements as quickly as is practicable. Now, the reason we're emphasizing this so much is that we know that youth experiencing homelessness may be moving from place to place, It can be a lot easier to lose track of or misplace vital documents like a license, like paperwork, any important documentation. And so there are also additional barriers for homeless youth in applying for and obtaining IDs if they're not able to took money down for the fee or put an address down on applications. So we have a few resources for you. Uh, the National Network for Youth has a free hotline called the I Am Here Vital Document Legal Hotline for Youth. So youth experiencing homelessness or professionals can call this number to receive free legal advice on applying for and obtaining vital documents in your state, because different states have their own requirements and process to apply for and obtain vital documents. And so this hotline can provide a great resource and assistance in applying for these IDs. And these documents include a driver's license, birth certificate, social security cards, passports, everything like that. And then SchoolHouse Connection also has a resource page that breaks down what is verification, a very digestible way for students, for families, and for professionals as well, with some additional resources in applying for and obtaining IDs. Now we have a few policies we want to go over that are specific to unaccompanied homeless youth on the FAFSA. The first is that youth who are independent through a homeless youth determination are now to be presumed independent in subsequent years unless their situation changes or there is conflicting information. So in the past, students used to have to redocument and recertify their homeless status every year in order to maintain that independent student status. But now, as a result of the FAFSA Simplification Act, that is no longer the case. So as long as their situation has not changed, the financial aid office should not be requesting additional documentation, additional determinations in order to prove their homeless status each year. And determinations of unaccompanied homeless youth and foster youth status must be made as quickly as practicable by the financial aid office, but no later than 60 days of enrollment or 60 days of the date of that request for a determination. And then certain programs and entities are authorized to verify a homeless status for unaccompanied homeless youth, which we have covered on in this presentation. But what's important to know about these is if the financial aid administrator receives a determination from any of these individuals, they must accept that determination and should not be asking for additional documentation. So a determination from any of those authorized individuals is enough to verify the student's homeless status. We don't need anything else for the financial aid office. And then if no determination is available from those authorized individuals, it is the financial aid administrator's responsibility to make that determination based on a statement from the student. And I'll hand it off to Jenny once more.
Great, thanks, Caleb. And so, as we noted a couple of slides back, there are an expanded number of people who can verify a young person's current or former foster care status. So again, have the court orders, but we also have an attorney, a guardian ad litem, a court-appointed special advocate, a data match, any proof that the young person has that they are receiving the education and training voucher or are eligible for the Chafee program. And again, as we said, it can be a written statement, but it could also be a phone call that is documented. So again, hopefully that provides enough options for young people to easily get that verification. Another thing that was new and really helpful in the FAFSA Simplification Act was a clarification that any funds that a youth in foster care or even a former foster youth receives that is funded through the Title IV-E program, and that would include both education and training vouchers, that would include any funds through the Chafee program, or if you're in extended foster care and you might be getting a monthly stipend to help pay your rent, that those are not considered other financial assistance when the school school is determining the student's financial aid package. And what that really means for a young person is that it won't reduce your financial aid award. It won't detract from what your package will look like. And it is, as we're saying, it's a newer policy. And so some schools, it seems like it haven't fully implemented it. So definitely, young people and those working with them, keep your eye on this because it really is an important policy and it makes a difference because it means that ETV and Chafee and other financial assistance a young person has should kind of be layered on top of their financial aid rather than reducing their financial aid package. And then for all students, emergency financial assistance is similar to the foster care payments I just mentioned, that those also should not be considered other financial assistance and detract from the student's financial aid package. So if they've received emergency financial assistance, whether it's for food, transportation, or housing, that shouldn't take away from their financial aid package and resources. And then, as Caleb mentioned earlier, just about these different, both the unaccompanied homeless youth and then foster youth and then provisional independence, that these are all separate and distinct processes. And while it can be really confusing and while we have all these trainings to help clarify, it is important to keep them separate so you really can advocate for the student using the rules for each one, but also identifying whether either of all three of these routes works best for the student.
Thank you so much, Jenny. We'll go ahead and move forward. Before we hear from our friends at Colorado State University, I want to take a pause and ask Jillian, do we have any common questions or anything that we should address live to the audience?
Yeah, we actually just got a question in right now that I think would be helpful to answer live. And this person is asking, is it possible for a student's homeless status to be verified by a McKinney-Vento liaison after they graduated high school? Or does it need to take place prior to high school graduation?
That is a great question. And if the McKinney-Vento liaison or their designee is aware of the student situation and can confirm that the student meets the definitions for unaccompanied and homeless or unaccompanied self-supporting and at risk of homelessness on or after July 1st of the applicable year. So for the 26-27 FAFSA, that'll be July 1st of 2025. The McKinney-Vento liaison or their designee can make that determination. However, if that individual is not comfortable making that determination, they can, the student can request a determination from the financial aid administrator. So if no determination is available from McKinney-Vento liaison or designee or homeless service provider, TRIO or Gear Up, then it's the financial aid administrator's responsibility to then make that determination.
Great, thank you. And I'm kind of combined two questions that were asked already about a student that's living with a relative, maybe it's a grandparent, an aunt. Let's say that they're stably housed. Would they be considered independent? And if so, how would they be considered independent?
So in those cases, if you remember our flow chart, first question we want to ask is the student unaccompanied? Are they living in the physical custody of a parent or legal guardian? If they're living with an aunt or a grandma, it sounds like the answer is yes. So then we move to the next level and ask, does the student's situation meet the definitions for homeless or self-supporting and at risk of homelessness? And it sounds like if they are stably housed with this family member, that the answer to both of those questions is no. So they would not be considered an independent student through a homeless youth determination. However, a student may consider an option called a dependency override, in which the relationship between the student and their parents are evaluated by the financial aid office. So both are routes to an independent student status. They're just two different ways of getting to the same place. So the homeless youth determination is looking more at their housing and their living situation, whereas the dependency override is looking more at the severance of a relationship between students and parents. So the short answer to that question is no, not through a homeless youth determination, but there may be another option depending on the relationship with the parents to pursue a dependency override.
And Caleb, one thing, although it doesn't seem like it was in the fact pattern, but if for some reason the grandparents, if the youth was placed in the grandparents' care, like through a court-ordered guardianship, that might be another basis for independent student status. It doesn't look like that was in the question, but just in terms of like exhausting those kind of three avenues, and asking those couple of questions to make sure there's not a route into independence if eligible.
Exactly, yeah. And then we can also ask if the grandparent or the aunt or whoever the family member is, if they have adopted the student as determined by a court, that family member would then be considered a parent on the FAFSA. So they would be considered dependent in that case. They would use their adopted parents' information. Yeah, all great questions. We will have another break for questions in a little bit, but I want to make sure we have some time to hear from our friends over at Colorado State University. So we've been talking about the FAFSA and applying for financial aid, but I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear from our friends at CSU about the work that they're doing, not only to help these youth apply for financial aid, but also to create a sense of belonging and really include wraparound services for these students. So I will go ahead and hand it off to you all and let you introduce yourselves.
Thank you so much for letting us join. My name is Andrea Fortney, she, hers pronouns, and I'm the director of our Fostering Success program, or we call it FSP for short, at Colorado State University. And we are really excited today to talk with you about a pretty unique partnership program that we have called Independent Student Visit Day, where we get to invite students in high school across the state and students who have recently graduated from high school to our campus. So if you want to go on to the next slide. And the one thing I will say is, because this is such a partnership, we will be talking a little bit about our Fostering Success program, and we're very fortunate to have some partners here from our admissions office as well as Office of Financial Aid, who are part of what we do and also part of Independent Student Visit Day. So just to give you a snapshot of who the Fostering Success program is, we are a program of about 330 students at Colorado State University from independent backgrounds. So that includes students who were in foster care, unaccompanied homeless or McKinney-Vento, orphan, ward of court, legal guardian, kinship care, emancipation, or other independent backgrounds. And our vision and mission in FSP is really to create a sense of belonging, a sense of community for independent students. We really do holistic support. So while education is sort of at the center of everything we do working in higher education, we really also tap into students' personal strengths and areas that we can support in terms of those other life domains as well. So again, our focus is really to help students who are current college students with independent backgrounds be successful in college and successfully graduate. So I'm going to actually turn it over to one of our student leaders to talk about this Independent Student Visit Day that we've been able to offer for the last number of years.
Hello, my name is Caitlin, and I'm a third-year undergraduate student in the biomedical science program at CSU, and both a facilitator and mentor within the Fostering Success program. I want to start off my slide by talking about Independent Student Visit Day and what it means to attend as a student, and then later I'll talk about what it's like to do an Independent Student Visit Day as a staff member. So, a little bit about me. I was in the foster care system, and to put it bluntly, it was a very isolating experience, one that left me feeling like I never truly belonged anywhere. My entire life had been marked by that same sense of distance, of watching others find stability and connection, while I struggled to understand what that even looked like, or even having a warped view of standing on shifting sands and calling that stable. I don't have that traditional familial support system with the kind of foundation most people take for granted. Instead, I learned early on to depend on myself and to navigate the world without a safety net. When I had decided to defy expectations and decided to go to college because I had the ability and financial means to, I expected it to be much of the same of navigating it by myself. It was the Fostering Success program that reached out to me it that worldview changed. And it was then I realized I was no longer completely alone. There was a community of folks who understood what it meant to not have that foundation. I visited the campus as a high school student at the first ever Independent Student Visit Day, and the idea that there was a community for me was truly incredible. As you can see on the slide, there's an image of one of the social events that's hosted by FSP. Knowing that I had that kind of community was truly remarkable. Truthfully, it can make the college experience a little overwhelming going to a usual admissions event and not having a parent or traditional guardian, um, like everyone else around you to go with you. It can make students feel like they don't belong. But acknowledging independent students not only destigmatizes it, but brings independent students like me a sense of community. Walking into the meeting room that the event was being held and seeing a group of folks that were dedicated to supporting me made the idea of coming to college a little less intimidating. If you want to go to the next slide, that's from the student perspective, though. What is an independent student visit day as a staff perspective? By the next Independent Student Visit Day, I started at CSU and I was working as a student staff member. I wanted to start with a story here about my semester as a facilitator when I had been attending the first part of the event for lunch. And I managed to snag two students to sit with me, and we had a real conversation with them pretty much one on one. One of them was interested in biomedical science and as well had a foster care background, so she and I really connected. You could really see the way her brain was turning when given the information on how to proceed with the options she never knew existed. Now, most students are there for a free day off of school and don't seriously consider college. They don't seriously think they have the means to get there and that they're just going to hear the same things they've been told to them before. But if you can get one student, and just one, to believe that they can go to college, that it's a real possibility for them, it's a story that you'll keep telling years later because it shows what the power of a little bit of care and compassion can do. And you can go on to the next slide.
Thank you, Caitlin. My name is Shannon Teifer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of Engagement at the Office of Admissions at Colorado State University. So Caitlin so beautifully put kind of the why behind hosting something like the Independent Student Visit Day. I am going to dive a little deeper into the how of how we can launch something like this, and it truly comes down to our partnerships, both on campus and off campus. So again, just very briefly, I want to show the different departments on our campus that we connect in order to launch something like this. So admissions, that's the office I work with. We help set up more of the logistical piece. So we put this event in our customer relation management system, Slate. And then Andrea, who you heard from earlier and you'll hear from following me, really helps us get the word out. So she has this really robust contact list of high school partners and other partners throughout the state of Colorado to support our independent students. And she blasts it like a megaphone, and it has actually been really great over the last couple of years, seeing this program evolve into pseudo group visits for our high schools. And now they are bringing buses of students to campus to participate in something like this. So on-campus partners, we have, like I mentioned, Office of Admissions. You will hear from our Office of Financial Aid, who is able to speak during the event about other resources that they can, that our independent students can tap into, both at Colorado State University and then Colorado-specific state aid as well. Since this program has had several iterations on our campus, our program does look differently from year to year. Sometimes we also are able to have our colleges attend and host a resource fair where they talk about majors that our students can participate in. And then sometimes we also do student support services like involvement, band, things like that, that students, when you attend Colorado State, you can kind of hop into as well. Now, you can see the agenda right there on the PowerPoint. So it breaks down different touch points that Andrea and our team kind of create. So we create more of that social component through something called Human Bingo. And it is kind of what it sounds like. You're given a grid and you are encouraged to complete your bingo sheet. And that just really breaks down some of those barriers of like, who are these people that I don't know in this room? It allows us to start the day off in a warmer setting. Next, we host a student panel with current students at Colorado State who have independent backgrounds, who share their experiences. Then we have sessions related to financial aid services, depending on their population. And we provide specific admissions programming where we get to talk about CSU a little more generally, our culture, academics, student life, and then financial aid resources in a more general sense, including deadlines. And then we get to take them on a campus tour in smaller groups. So this agenda does provide a combination of population specific and background specific programming. It creates that connection to peers and resources, and then access to higher education. So now, while we are hosting it at Colorado State University, while we want every single one of them to become a RAM, we understand and we try and convey this in the tone and message of our programming is that it's really access to higher education that we are trying to communicate to our guests that are with us on that day, and that access to a four-year degree is possible as well. So next, I'd like to go ahead and hand things on off to Andrea, our Director of Fostering Success.
Thanks, Shannon. And this is the FSP student panel in action that Shannon mentioned, which you can see Caitlin is part of. And this is one of the, I think, most impactful aspects of the day is having youth be able to ask questions. What does it look like to be an independent student in college? And for someone who was recently in their in their shoes a couple of years ago, being able to see college students who are successfully navigating higher education is a game changer. I'm just amazed as the day progresses, like the light switches that are happening from, again, as Caitlin mentioned, students just having a day off school to at the end of the day saying like, college is actually a possibility. And I could get my college entirely paid for, which is an incredible amount of just for so many of the students, not realizing that college could be a possibility and to think that it is. So I think one of the things that Shannon mentioned that's important is the statewide partnerships. And I will say we can throw on this entirely amazing event, and if no one shows up, then it's really not worth it. And so one of the things that I'm going to point out is, I think, unfortunately, we all work in our own silos. I know in higher education, I did not know what the term highly mobile meant, which I think is more of a common K through 12 term. I also know that a lot of my colleagues are not familiar with the term McKinney-Vento, which is a very familiar K through 12 term. And I was fortunate to be married to a McKinney-Vento liaison, Mark. And so Mark really was instrumental in helping us get this independent student visit day going. I am not ashamed of name dropping. The first year we hosted Independent Student Visit Day and going out to the state, our Colorado Department of Education has an incredible list of all the homeless education liaisons in our state on their website, which is amazing. And so Mark pointing me in that direction and getting us connected across the state to high school programs was incredible. And so the first year we hosted this, we had a little over 30 youth attend, which was great. This year we had over 100. So this event just continues to grow in numbers and in strength. And I think I just like to give a shout out to all of the community partners. Last Friday when we hosted, we had a CASA bringing one of their youth. We've had Chafee groups bringing, youth who have aged out of foster care. McKinney-Vento, you always bring a large number of youth from the high schools. So just having those partnerships has been so key, I think, in making this really happen. And it's been fun for the schools to have that sort of community with the McKinney-Vento groups or the child education welfare liaisons, bringing a group of foster youth from schools. I also want to talk about like the practicality of how does this happen? Honestly, the funding for this is an easy sell. The first year we did this, we ran this by some of our administrators at CSU, and we were able to get some enrollment and access funding. So I think if you're here as a college, thinking about how to make your institution more accessible to a group of students who's underrepresented in higher education. And we've been fortunate that admissions has also supported with the cost of this event. I honestly would not put on this event without Shannon and team doing all the things that they do so amazingly. So I think also thinking about if you're a smaller campus support program like FSP, knowing that those campus-wide partnerships are so critical because admissions does this on a regular basis. We do not do large-scale events to this grandeur. So the other thing is we have been really fortunate to have Colorado Department of Education fund this event for the last couple of years. And so I just want to really hopefully put this on your radar in your state. We're hoping this spreads to other institutions because this is a benefit to your institution. If you work in the K through 12 education system, this is a huge benefit to you. I know as we get folks from the high school programs, they ask about what other institutions in the state do this because they want to take their students on multiple campus visits. And having a forum where students can see this in a relatable way, as Caitlin mentioned, something that is specifically designed for them is really critical. So again, this has been an impactful experience for youth across the state. If this changes the life trajectory of even one youth, we feel like it's worth it.
So the truth is, we all have to pay for college somehow. Initially, I didn't even think I could go to college until I learned about the financial aid opportunities within my state. And navigating financial aid can feel overwhelming. Not only is there a stigma around asking for help, but the process itself involves official government documents that can feel intimidating. I know for me, there was always a fear of messing it up. And as an independent student, I didn't have the option of sitting down with a parent to walk me through it. And many students don't have access to their parents' financial information or face barriers that make the process even more stressful. This year, as a mentor, I had a student come into my office and asked if I could just sit with her while she completed the FAFSA. Now, I'm not a financial aid expert. Most of us aren't, but what mattered wasn't the technical knowledge. It was the rapport and trust we'd built that made it comforting for her to have someone there. The truth is, she was perfectly capable. She filled everything out on her own, and if she had any questions I couldn't answer, I felt comfortable directing her to our financial aid liaison in office. But I barely needed to say a word. Having someone sit beside her made the process feel less isolating. If I were to hazard a guess or just give some advice, I would say if someone truly wants to support students with the FAFSA, offering office hours maybe dedicated to simply being present, helping only when asked, or directing them to whatever college financial aid they want for more technical questions can make a world of difference. Many independent students like myself grow used to relying solely on themselves. But creating a space where support is offered without pressure or judgment can be incredibly meaningful.
Thanks, Caitlin. Hey there, folks. Thank you so much for hosting us today. My name is Melissa Henke. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the Senior Coordinator of the Fostering Success Program. I come from an independent background myself and was an FSP student and mentor here at CSU during my undergrad. I'm here to echo what Andrea said and tell you that we couldn't do what we do without the support of our campus and community partnerships. From working with our CSU Rams Against Hunger Food Support Office that helps students get access to nutrition, to affordable housing initiatives with Lutheran ministries that help at-risk students pay rent, we're always finding ways to support the holistic needs of our group. Even our Office of Case Management helps Rams through applications like SNAP and Medicaid, as well as assist them through times of crisis and unexpected circumstance. We also collaborate with the Colorado Department of Higher Education to help educate youth around the state on programs like ours with events like ISDV, as Andrea's also highlighted. We can't speak highly enough of the folks who work with us to support students from independent backgrounds, especially those from McKinney-Vento and foster care experiences like we're covering today. One of our SPOCs in the Office of Financial Aid, who helps us with state programs like Foster Ed and Empower Ed, and who also serves on our Emergency Fund Committee, is joining us today. Adrina, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about the work you do here?
Yeah, hi, my name is Adrina Pollack. I'm the Assistant Director for Communications in the Office of Financial Aid here at Colorado State University. I've actually worked as a single point of contact, so a SPOC, at the university level in the state of Colorado for the past 10 years, and so at multiple institutions here in our state. And as Melissa mentioned previously, I'm our university's liaison for some of the state programs that we have, Empower Ed and Foster Ed. And I also participate in the Emergency Funding Committee. My work, I think, allows me to provide not only some resources and financial aid information to students, but also some financial aid coaching to students who may have little or no prior experience with the financial aid process. Many of our students and even campus partners here at CSU, I think, are familiar at this point in time with the work that I do on our campus and know that they can come to me when navigating those complex financial situations or when they need help finding the resources to continue their education. So really the hope with my role is that by building these connections as a liaison, that as an institution, we can streamline communication and really strengthen the support systems that we have available to our independent student population here at CSU.
Thank you so much, Adrina, and thank you all for listening to us today. And with that, I'll leave you all to hear from our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Adrina. If I were to give another piece of advice, it would be to build rapport with independent students. As I've said before, independent students naturally feel the need to navigate life on their own, but that's not the case. There's so many wonderful people in the world, such as yourselves, who want to help these students, who want to get these students to college. Understanding can go a long way, and being trained on the niche aspects of independent students' lives to help with their financial needs is paramount. I adore having someone like Adrina who is trained to specifically meet the needs of the independent student population. There's so many times Adrina has responded to my panicked emails that I send at 3 a.m., reassuring me about my financial needs and helping me through any questions, that we've built a system of trust that is critical for the college experience. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm going to hand it back off to Andrea.
And we can go to our final slide. We just want to thank you. We hope that Independent Student Visit Day spreads throughout the nation. Please contact us if you have any questions or if there are things that you want to talk through with us as you're thinking about putting together a program like this. At this point, we can open it up if there are any questions.
All right, I don't see any questions in the chat, but I am seeing tons of heart reactions, celebrations, and claps. So thank you so much for sharing all of your experience and perspectives and all of the wonderful, wonderful work that you are doing. And the reactions are still coming in. So bask in all of that, and you're doing really great work. I want to take us home. We have a couple of minutes left. I want to make sure we have enough time to cover everything here. I want to cover some best practices in regards to the FAFSA and just reminding students that the FAFSA needs to be filled out every year, and the earlier, the sooner, the better. Every state and every institution may have their own priority deadlines for the FAFSA or alternative applications for those who don't qualify for the FAFSA in states that have alternative applications. Uh, And if you are an authorized individual to provide a determination for students experiencing homelessness, please provide those determinations early and often. Make sure students have multiple copies of determination letters. They can give those to the financial aid office. And host financial aid nights. Partner with your local colleges, partner with your local community-based organizations, lend devices, make it as easy as possible for students to fill out the FAFSA and meet them where they are. And for those who are working with high school students who are maybe in their senior year or junior or even earlier, start that conversation about applying for important documents like IDs, driver's license, and make sure that they know that it's important to apply for and to have those on hand, not just for financial aid, but for many other areas in life as well. And we encourage constant communication with the financial aid office, even if they don't qualify as an unaccompanied homeless youth. There may still be additional resources for students experiencing homelessness with their families or other hardships. And research, scholarships, and grant opportunities that are local to your region. I like to recommend starting as local as you can, and then you're working your way out to a broader scope there, so that you're starting with the least amount of competition in those scholarships. Also inform students that in order to receive financial aid and to continue receiving financial aid, there are minimum grade standards or satisfactory academic progress that must be maintained. And so make sure that they know that they must be maintaining grades, and if they are considering dropping or withdrawing or failing some classes, to just check in with the financial aid office to see how that might impact their eligibility for financial aid. We also have resources on our website as well. So please peruse our FAFSA page on our website and document next steps for students. And then for those working on the higher education side, identify resources both on campus that are offered through your institution, but also in your community and the communities in which your students might be staying or living. And then we have links here for a map and resources here to help search for these resources as well. And then some institutions and some places might have a tuition waiver or fee waiver for youth experiencing homelessness. So make sure that we are up to date on those. And then it's important also to advocate for students, right? Because especially those that are unaccompanied or on their own may not have a support system with them around them already. And so as best as we can support these students, we encourage that. And financial aid offices, as much as they have on their plates, sometimes the changes from the FAFSA Simplification Act have gone under the radar sometimes. And so we want to advocate for these students if, say, a financial aid office might be using an outdated list of authorized individuals. We have a few resources here we recommend using, but also connect with us. We are happy to connect with you and advocate with and on behalf of students. All right, we have just about 2 minutes left. I want to open it up to Jillian. I see some questions in the chat. Anything that you would like to have us answer live. And before we do that, thank you again, everyone, so much for joining us today. Thank you to Jenny and everyone at CSU for sharing your perspective and your experience. It's been invaluable for us all to hear. But I want to open up to Jillian for any questions we want to address.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of questions about undocumented students and students with immigration status. Just want to clarify, undocumented students should not be filling out the FAFSA. It is only for citizens and eligible non-citizens. We are actually going to be doing a webinar in January. So maybe Caleb, if you want to go to the next few slides. So folks are aware of the webinar happening on January 22nd, Understanding Immigration Status and Financial Aid Eligibility. That's January 2nd at 3 p.m. Eastern. Some states might have state-specific aid for undocumented students. So California, Texas, I saw someone, Maryland said one as well. And those applications are eligible for undocumented students, but it's only for state aid. But I know we are at time. Thank you so much for asking questions. Our contact information is on the next few slides. But again, we just want to thank Jenny and CSU folks for sharing all the amazing work that you are doing. If we did not have time to answer your questions, please reach out to us, especially Caleb. He is our financial aid expert here at Schoolhouse Connection. So just thank you all again, and I'll turn it back to you, Caleb, to close us out.
All right, thank you so much, Jillian. And as Jillian said, our contact information is here on these slides. For anyone who has questions or would like to get in touch with the Fostering Success Program at Colorado State University to learn more about what they're doing or just ask how they're implementing this work, you can use this email here on the slide, the stuach_fostering_success at mail.colostate.edu. So that's a great place to get in touch with them. But thank you again so much for everyone joining us today. Sign up for a newsletter to stay up to date on policy changes and advocacy opportunities and learning opportunities. And then with that, I think we will go ahead and close it down. So thank you again, everyone.